you'll want to change this to say you want to contribute this fork. This fork's upstream location is really MHC programs main. So this is important to make the PR process work correctly and more simply for you later. If you do this, it will fill in the right data for you correctly. Hello, everybody. My name is Richard, Shard632. In this particular workshop or build along, I'm going to be the Git whisperer to help people who maybe are not as familiar with Git and GitHub Markdown understand how to use it and create documents that they can submit for the current open source competition. If you're super familiar with Git or GitHub and or super familiar with GitHub Markdown, this might be review for you. But if you are kind of new to this whole thing of using Git and GitHub and writing documentation using the Markdown language, this is probably really valuable for you, especially if you want to contribute to documents to the competition, or if later you want to contribute to the documentation that we have elsewhere on GitHub that is sort of creator written and creator maintained. So at some point, we hope to have more people submitting updates and either just like small typos or errata or whole new sections of documentation to our GitHub repository. And that's sort of the hope, is that this competition will help foster people to understand how to do that so that it'll get people interested in maintaining those docs going forward. The agenda for this talk is really going to be an introduction to GitHub, sort of a walkthrough of creating a fork of the contest repo and adding a new documentation file, writing some Markdown documentation, which is going to go over sort of what is Markdown and what can you do with it, and then how to commit your changes So in that writing Markdown documentation section, that's where I'll have like a template. We'll just sort of discuss what goes in a document in the template. And then we'll commit your changes and create a pull request to the contest repo. And then there'll be, if we have time, it's how to set up VS Code to do local editing of the Markdown, which has live preview, which is somewhat interesting. Makes it a little bit easier to see what your Markdown is going to be doing, because you can see sort of a live preview of what it actually looks like right at that moment, rather than having to like toggle back and forth. All right, so first up, an introduction to GitHub. So you have to create an account on GitHub if you don't already have one. Really pretty simple. I actually already have one created, so I'm not going to really go over that in a lot of detail. I'm not going to step through that part because I already have one. But you have to create an account. You have to go to the competition repo, which is MHCP Programs Worlds Documentation. Then you've got to fork your own personal copy of that repo, which will be now under GitHub and your name here, and then Worlds Documentation. And then I strongly recommend people create a branch in your copy of the repo, your fork of the repo, so that you can work on different document submissions independently. So we'll go through those steps. I don't know if anybody's had any questions so far on any of that. I can just go through. So this is just a really quick screenshot of like the creating an account. You've got to go to github.com, sign up, enter an email address, password, and an available username. So your username is going to be the way you're known on GitHub. So choose something that you want to be known by, because the address for the MHCP, again, you're talking about the address for the repo. So it's github.com/MHCP programs/worlds documentation. That's the GitHub repo. That's for the competition. So then you'll get an email with a code for verification, and then sign in using your username or your email and your password. So this is sort of what the sign-in page looks like. Just fill that out, create account. So then we'll get to forking a repo, and then this is where I'm going to flip back and forth between the slide deck and like actually doing this so we can actually see it in action. So first step is going to be to go to GitHub. So I'm now logged into my account in GitHub, which is called Shard632 MHCP demo for the purposes of this workshop. So if we go to github.com, MHCP programs, worlds documentation, So now I'm at the world's documentation MHCP programs page, and what I'm going to want to do is I'm just going to want to click fork and create a fork of this document. So as we can see here, right there, the click a fork button is when you're on the MHCP programs page. The make a fork button is this button right up here. And then it's going to give me this dialog about creating a fork. And this is where I'm going to then see my username. So I'm about to create this fork into my account. And this is the repository name. You can call it whatever you want, but I would probably recommend just naming it the same as whatever you're forking from. That's usually the most common way people do it. So you don't really have to change anything else here. You can just click create fork. It'll take a little bit of time. It's doing a little bit of work in the background on GitHub. And then boom. So now we're here. So you now notice it looks just the same as it was before, but it's right. So actually it's GitHub. So World Cubes, for confusing reasons, it's just github.com MHCP programs. World's documentation is the contest site. So the MHCP creators site, for very confusing reasons, is the location for the persistent documentation that's maintained by the MHCP creators. But for the contest, all of the contest documentation is going into MHCP programs. And then after the contest, the winning docs and the good docs and all that, we're going to get moved over into the MHCP creators GitHub. Unfortunately, we had issues with getting namings sorting out correctly, and I think it ended up kind of confusing, but you want to use the MHCP programs GitHub to create your forks. Anyway, here we are. We've got a fork. It's going to be owned by you. You click the create fork button, and then you're done. So now we have, this is my own copy. It's got my own name. Looks just the same as the one from before, but now it's forked from, it knows where it was forked from. And this is the important thing for working with GitHub, is it knows where this came from. So it's going to automatically help you send this stuff back to where it came from. And so by forking from the MHCP programs repo, it knows that's where stuff has to go back to, and it just makes everything much easier down the line. If you have forked it from the right location, it's easy to send it back to that location. So the next step is sort of a little subtle, but everything in GitHub has branches, and they're basically, even though you're in a fork, which is a copy of another repo owned by someone else, you can have multiple copies of all of the stuff in your repo in different branches. And this lets you work on things in parallel. So by default, there's the main branch, and this is the main place where you would share your documentation from if you're hosting the documentation on your own. The MHCP programs has a main branch also, and that's where they're hosting their documentation. But you probably want to work in a work branch of your branch, so you can have multiple different documents in progress at the same time and be contributing changes to those different documents independent of one another back into the MHCP programs repo. So I strongly recommend people make a branch for each document they want to work on. And that way they can make updates, and if they've contributed the document back to the competition through a PR, a pull request, which is the way that you submit the documents. If you want to make changes to it after the fact, it's much easier to independently make changes to different document submissions if you have a separate branch for each document you're contributing back. So that's just my main caveat. There's like, your life will be simpler if you have branches for each document. So we're going to go and look back at the branching. So you do this in your repo. There's this branches button right here. This is your repo. There's a branches button here that you can click that will let you access all the branches in your repo. You just click the new branch button and then fill out some information about your branch, and you can create a new branch. So I strongly recommend that you, as I mentioned, set up a different branch for each one of your contest submissions if you want them to be separate submissions. The branch naming, you can choose whatever you want for the branch name, alphanumeric, dashes, no spaces. Don't put spaces in your branch name. I think it might be technically allowed, but It makes things complicated elsewhere. And an important thing in setting up the branch is you'll want to switch the source, because that will make it easier to create your pull requests later. So anyway, click on the branch button. We click on the new branch button here. I will just call this MHCP build along sample or something. So the thing that I was pointing out on the slides is that currently the upstream location for this branch is going to be just main in your own repo, but really you're making changes that you want to contribute back to the MHCP programs repo. So you'll want to change this to say you want to contribute this fork. This fork's upstream location is really MHC programs main. So this is important to make the PR process work correctly and more simply for you later. If you do this, it will fill in the right data for you correctly. I mean, you can change it when you're doing your pull requests, but if you set up the branch so that the branch knows that it's not going back into your main, but it's going back into MHCP programs main, it'll make things easier down the road. So it's called MHCP build along sample, create the branch. So we have now both our main and our MHCP build along sample. If we go back to our main page, we have two branches now. And if you click on this drop down, you can switch which branch you're in. So we can click that. And now we're in the MHCP build along sample. So you want to make sure that before you're doing any work for this particular document submission, that you're in the right branch for whatever branch you chose for that document submission. If you have multiple documents that you're submitting, you might have multiple branches. So you might make another branch, called like my doc2 or something like that, which you're also submitting. And so you go back to your code, and now we have two branches here. So you just want to make sure you choose the right branch for the doc submission that you're working on so that you keep everything straight with your changes going into the right location. So basically, we've covered this branching session. You want to make sure you're in your own repo. You click on the branches button. You fill out whatever name you want for your branch. Make sure you do this step if switching it to the competition repo. That'll simplify things later on. And you just click create branch, and then that will make a new branch. So now we're in this build along sample branch here, and we're going to add some docs. So how do we do that? So when you're adding docs, make sure again you're in your repo, you're in the right branch for the submission that you're working on. You just want to navigate to the correct location in the tree, in the folder structure that's relevant for the doc type that you're creating. And there's several different submission categories that Meta has chosen that they want to see the docs written in. There's a lighting, colliders, and audio category, an asset library import category, a monetization category, a performance category, and an NPC category. So it's important that you know your category that you're in, because you need to put the document in the right folder. And second, later on, when you submit the document using a pull request, you need to put this little thing as a prefix in the submission. You say, this is for monetization, or this is for NPCs. So here we're going to go to docs, and we'll go to monetization. So now we're in the monetization folder, and I'm just going to say I'm going to add a new file here. So I'm in the right spot, monetization. I'm going to say create new file. And then now we're in the file creating stage. The first thing I should do is name the file. So make lots of money.md. So you just want to choose a name for your document, and this .md is important. That stands for Markdown. So make sure your document ends with .md, because that tells the system that it's going to be a Markdown file. Now you're just in an editor, a text editor, and you can, if you want, you can just do all of your documentation work right in here, right in this text editor, because you don't even have to download or use a different program or go to a different website. You can just do it all here. And you can switch back and forth between edit mode, where you're like typing the markdown, and preview mode, where you can see how it's going to look. So we've gone through making sure you're in the right branch, making sure you're in your correct folder, clicking create file, naming your document something that's informative about the contents of the document. Don't put any spaces in the document names, please. That's going to make things super difficult for other people if you have spaces in the document names. Please make them one word. You can use camel case like this. You could use dashes, but probably just alphanumeric is the best. Must end in MD. So that's how you start your document commissions. So now we're going to kind of jump quickly over into Markdown and what Markdown is, because this is going to be important for the next stage, which is actually writing your document. Markdown uses the simplified system for formatting. It's basically similar-ish in intent to HTML, but it's much, much simpler than HTML. So if you're familiar with HTML, this is probably fairly understandable what's going on here under the covers. But if you're not, it's just an easier, more approachable, and more readable in its source form about what's going on in the document format relative to how it's going to end up being recorded. So it's a structural description of the document. It's not really as layout centric. It's got easy to read and parse formatting. It's easier to merge changes from different authors together if you have multiple people working on the same document, which is important for the eventual location of all these documents, which will be the MHCP creators site, because there we will have potentially people making small changes or updates to existing documents that they want to refine. And as you can see, you can sort of, as you're scanning, you can headers, there's a bunch of different little characters that you put around your text, and they translate into different things. Anyway, so Markdown, there are different flavors of Markdown. So if you're looking at online references, make sure you're looking at an online reference for Markdown that's about the GitHub flavor of Markdown, because some of them are slightly different than each other. They're mostly the same, but some of them have some slight differences. GitHub doesn't have any live preview, but it does have a preview button to toggle to let you see what it looks like right now. And additionally, there's a bunch of guides for writing Markdown. So this one in particular is on GitHub, and this is linked at the end of the document, this URL. And as you can see, there's just a bunch of different examples of how you do different kinds of headings. They basically just start with a little hash mark. The more hash marks you put at the start, the deeper the heading. So if you put like 5 hash marks, it would be a 5th level heading, and the font would be smaller. It's an important thing here is when you use these hash marks, these are important for organizing your document with headings, because as you use these little hash marks, they will actually be interpreted by GitHub as sections and subsections, and it will automatically make a little outline of your document. So you don't really have to put a table of contents into your document if this is all you really want, is just like to have a little outline view. It'll automatically be made if you organize your document using these little number sign markings. It will nest them into this nice little doc over onto the side, a nice little outline onto the side. There's a bunch of different styling options, like for bold text, it's with 2 stars or 2 underlines. For italics, it's 1 star, 1 underline. You can do strike throughs, bold and strike throughs by just putting them together. Bold and italic. This is bold and nest italic. This is bold and all italic. I didn't know about this one. Triple star makes it bold and italic. Okay. There's subscripts, superscripts. You can quote text. This makes a little like a indentation paragraph block thing with a little bar on the side as though you're quoting something. And that's just by putting a little greater than sign at the start of the line. You can quote code and either inline with like a single or triple tick. This is very similar to what you're doing on Discord when you're typing. Discord uses Markdown. So if you're familiar, the Discord Markdown is pretty similar to GitHub Markdown. So if you're familiar with Discord Markdown, it will make sense here. There's some anyway, there's lots of different things. Links are a particular thing. Like if you want to make a hyperlink that's going from your document to some other document, and this is the way you do that is with a bracket, the text that you want to appear on your page, and bracket, and then parenthesis, and in the parenthesis you put the URL. You can use the same format to like jump to different sections in your document. So let me see if they have an example of this here. Yeah, here's an example. So if you have a bunch of headings in your document and you want to link to this a sample section heading. So say you want to have a link from here in your document back up to here. So you have this one called sample section, has 2 hash marks. You can reference that by using the same link formatting you do to put bracket and then whatever the text you want. And then instead of the URL here, you put a little hash and then sample dash section. You just basically turn any spaces into dashes. For instance, this one is this will be a helpful section about Greek letter theta. You know, this is this whole section, this whole thing here. You drop out like special characters like the underlines and punctuation and just turn the spaces into dashes, and that's how you would link to those different sections. If you're using an authoring tool, oftentimes that'll help you like auto-complete these different sections, so you don't have to know exactly what the way to translate something. If you're using a lot of formatting in your section headings, as you can see, you have to drop out all the formatting, all the punctuation, and turn all the spaces into dashes in order to get the section name. So there's relative links. Custom anchors are sort of unimportant. Line breaks, if you want to do line breaks, 2 spaces at the end of a line will break the line. So if you just have 1 space after a character, it's going to automatically line wrap everything. So just read through line breaks. Images are very similar to how you link hyperlinks, except that you put a little exclamation point at the start, put some text for what's your image, the alternate text for your image, and then the URL of the image. There's more and more and more of these things. There's lists, there's nested lists, task lists, and then this is all just these are all the simple Markdown, and there's a whole section on advanced Markdown for tables and collapsing sections and diagrams and things like that, mathematical expressions if you need to do that. So we were at the point here where we're gonna write a new document. So I'm gonna go over and just grab this template that I have written that I think is a useful starting point for documents. I just cut and paste this Markdown from a GitHub repo. This is the location of this. I'll just drop really quickly into the chat. This is sort of the template that I am providing in this workshop as a starting point for writing your Markdown. And we'll just go quickly over what I've gotten here, and then we can see how it's written in the Markdown and how it looks in the preview. So recommendation for how you should format, like a template for what your documents should look like. You should have, and we'll just quickly go to the preview mode so we can look at this in preview. So a title of your document, your name, who you are, and the last modified date. These are super useful things that a lot of documents for some reason don't have who wrote it and when it was last written. It's very useful for people to know when they're looking at a document that it's not really, really old, that it's reasonably up to date. And also knowing who wrote it gives that person some indication of like what this person's level of expertise is and who they can go and find and ask more questions of later if they see them on the forums or the Discords or something. Then an introduction, prerequisite, and then this would have some subsections of prerequisites and expectations and document organization. And then you'd have your topics with, here's just some examples of some different formatting. Another topic, some additional other formatting. This one actually I threw a whole little diagram in here just to show that you can put diagrams in. And then at the very end, you could have a conclusion section if it makes sense for your document, but definitely have a references section with a link off into other writing resources. And now that I'm thinking about it, this would be a good place for me to link off to the documentation for writing GitHub Markdown. So So we'll just quickly bounce back up here to the top and go back to edit mode. So as you can see here, I've put a bunch of comments in this document. So these little bracket bang dash dash, this is ways you can put comments in your Markdown so that they don't appear in the rendered view. And so I have a lot of commentary in this particular document talking about what I'm doing in this doc. So your title, your name, the last that was modified. And then this section here, this is describe what your document is going to cover. Apparently when I maybe turn on soft wrap, okay. So, this introduction should describe what your document's going to cover, try to provide background about what the reason why people would want to read it, some motivation as to why they should read your document, explaining why some particular thing in Horizon is hard to do or very valuable to do, something like that, that gives people an indication of like, if I read this document, I'm going to gain, this particular knowledge so that I'm able to accomplish this particular task. Just a really quick summary so that they can kind of see what they're going to get out of this document and why they should read it. Then this prerequisites, as you notice, has 3 hashes. So this is a subsection of introduction. This prerequisites section, this is, we want to sort of give people some framing about what they're going to need to know and before they'll be able to make really effective use of this document. So if you have some sort of other materials or concepts that they should already be familiar with, or other documents they should have read before they got to this one, you might put that in this prerequisite section. So like here I said, you should have a GitHub account and you should be familiar with GitHub Markdown and formatting. And you have some knowledge about what you're about to write about. This is just me making up some sort of BS stuff for this template, but you should just like delete this and fill it in with whatever you think is going to be the relevant prerequisites and expectations for your document. So like if you're writing a document about my asset import, just like what Pigeon was just referring to in the chat, like you might as a prerequisite, like that you kind of, how to use Maya already, you have Maya. So because you're going to kind of assume that they're coming with knowledge about that kind of, and so you should sort of present what you're assuming the knowledge they already have is going to be before they go into reading your document. This document organization section, like as I mentioned, there's an automatic outline view attached to the documents when they're in GitHub. So, and those outlines are made by these section headings. So this section is sort of maybe not super necessary unless you have something particular you want to say about the organization of your document, like that if you have 2 main sections, this main section talks about setup and the second section talks about execution or whatever, you might want to call that out here. So just give some people some orientation to the broad strokes of your document. And I just mentioned in the doc comments here about the GitHub will automatically create an outline view from your little section headings. So you may not need this section if you don't have a very complicated document. But here is an example of me making a little bullet list. These are this is Markdown for a list. This is Markdown for links. And these are all internal links to different sections of the document, because they start with a little pound topic 1, pound topic 2, and pound references. So this is pound topic 1, some bold text, a subsection, there's some lists. So unordered lists are just, put a dash, a space, and then your stuff, your items for the list. To make sublists, you just have to line up the dash with the beginning of the previous line. So this dash lines up with the S, this dash lines up with the N. As you're going down, it will automatically change the icons for the nested list items. Likewise, you can do ordered lists. It's the same. Ordered lists are the same as unordered lists in that you just put 1 dot and then space and then your item. You don't have to number these. You can, all these are say 1 dot. It'll automatically change the numbers for you when it's doing the layout. So it's easy to like add new things or remove things from an ordered list because you just have to put 1 dot on each one and then they will change when they're previewed into 1.2.3. So if we go to the preview of these, you can see like it's actually changing these to 1, I, double I, A, 2, 3, and these bullets got changed to like solid circle, open circle, solid square. So you just need to tell it about the format of the document and it will do like the layout later. Referencing code. If you want to reference some code, it's just like in Discord, triple backtick, and then put TS. TS tells it like this is going to be TypeScript or whatever language you're using, and just write your code in there, and then it will render out with like nice font coloring. That makes it easier to read. If you want to reference an image, is it okay to have more pages in the doc or make it all in one if it's a long doc? I would make your docs, I would probably try to keep the topic together in one doc, and unless it's like two really giant big things that are related, and then make two docs for it. If you think it's going to be just too long to scroll through, you could make two docs. I kind of personally prefer if it's one topic to have one doc and just have hyperlinks around in that doc that go from section to section, but it's really up to you. If you want to make a couple of docs that are work together to provide the information that people might want to read, and it makes more sense to organize them as separate docs, then go for it. Anyway, if you are doing separate docs, you're going to need to you're probably going to want to have hyperlinks between them, and so you can use the linking format, the bracket name, the type text of the link, then parenthesis, and then you can use relative links to just, if it's the document's right next to you, you can just use a relative link to the document that's sitting right next to it in the folder. Here's an example of images. It's the bang, then the title, the alternate text of the image. And here I'm using a relative link because I know that there's this image that's in the folder view that's up a few sections over here, and this images OG image.jpg. So I'm going up 2 levels over to the images folder and then down to find that image. So you can see what that all looks like in preview. There's that text. Anyway, later topic, more advanced things like tables, more advanced things like diagrams, and then, links off to other things like we could have the link off to maybe this basic. So anyway, so we're going to go to the commit session. So if you want to commit your changes, so we're going to just jump over here. You've written a whole your document. You're going to go click the commit changes button to commit your changes. You have to now save them into your branch in your repo. You're going to give a short commit message for yourself and a little description about what you did. And then you're going to hit commit changes. So that's going to look like this. So we're going to go up here, commit changes, create lots of info about Markdown. And then we're just going to commit it directly into this branch. This is the branch that I was working on. So that is checked this into my branch. So the important thing is this is not submitted yet to the competition. You've only just saved your work into GitHub in your repo, and you're in so this is your repo, this is your branch. And it's only in this branch. If I switch over to the main branch, like it's not in that branch. So make sure if you're like, oh, where's my file? Make sure you're looking at the branch where you check this into. Here, so that's where you've saved this copy, is in your repo and your branch. So you've got to commit. You can make more changes to it if you want. You can go, and if you want to edit it again, you can go and click this little edit button, make some other change to it. Maybe you want to put the advanced formatting in here. You're like, okay, good. I forgot that. Now I'm going to have the advanced markdown and commit that. Added advanced markdown. You can change the commit message if you want. So now commit that. So that's now been saved. That update's been saved into. See, now here the image works. Now that's update's been saved into your branch. So now the most important thing for all of this is that you need to commit this, and you need to submit this to the competition. So you've committed it, you've done the commit changes, it's in your repo, and now you need to create a pull request to submit it to the competition. So if you go back to your code view, There's a few different ways that you can submit changes to the competition. One is for a little while after you've submitted a change, it's going to have this little banner up here that says like, hey, something recently got added to this particular repo. This branch recently had a change, and you can click compare and pull request, and it'll allow you to make a pull request for that particular change. If you click that, you'll go to a screen that looks kind of like this, open pull request. We're going to go back to this in just a moment. This little bar will not exist forever. I don't know exactly when it goes away, but at some point it times out. Like, so this is a good way if you've just made a change and you're like, oh, I'm all done now, and I need to make a pull request and send this back to the main repo. The other way is you can go to your contribute tag, this contribute button here, but you need to make sure that you're on the right branch, because it's going to say this branch, this is talking about this particular branch. So if I go and click on contribute here, there's nothing to contribute from the main branch because I haven't actually made any changes here. You could switch over to the branch you were just working on, and it says, oh wait, this branch is 2 commits ahead of MHCP programs world documentation main. See, it knows when we're setting up this branch, we said this is where it came from. This is where it's useful for having told it where it came from, because it's keeping track of where it is relative to the MHCP programs repo. So here you can click contribute, and this will go to the same place that this compare and pull request button does. So this is the way you'll always be able to find a way to create a pull request, even if this little box up here has eventually timed out. Make sure you're on the branch that you're working on, and then go and click on the contribute button and say open pull request. That will go to this page, which is the comparing changes page. Important things that you want to look for here. You want to make sure that this is basically the pull request icon. You want to make sure that you're coming from your branch and your deep repo and your particular branch, and it's going into the MHCP programs world documentation main branch. Make sure that it's going into the right MHCP world documentations. Like this dropdown, there's other places it could go, but you want to make sure that you're going to the MHCP programs one. And so then you want to add a title here. Let me go back to my slides really quickly. We kind of went through this. You can click that to create a PR. You can make sure you're on the right branch. You can click contribute and open a pull request. Then you want to submit a pull request. Make sure that the source and destination are correct. And then you want to fill out your pull request. Does it have to be on the MHP programs repo to be eligible for the competition? Yes. You have to submit the PR back to the MHCP programs repo. That is where they're going to be doing the judging. So the important, make sure the target's correct. And then here's another important part for the competition is to ensure that you have the proper PR title here. So this is like a monetization example, monetization. So I put it in, if you remember, I put it in the monetization category. So they want you to put the category as a prefix of your pull request. So just make sure, like if you're doing something with NPCs, it would put NPC there. They're going to use that somehow to organize the judging. So they want to be able to see that title there. And then here is a section where you can write about your document and describe more about what's the audience or why your document's interesting, or something that providing information to the judges about the content of your document. Like obviously don't talk too much here. It shouldn't be longer than your document for sure. You're talking about like a paragraph sort of about the submission. Like this is that test submission for MHP workshop. Yeah, I'm going to do something dumb. So down below, you can see what you're submitting. Like this is just showing like these are the 2 changes I made. I created the file and then I updated the file. This is just a list of the changes that are being committed. And then below that, it shows you all of the diffs that are coming in. So here, everything is new because this is a brand new file. So it has pluses for every line, showing that all of these lines are new. They're all kind of shaded because they're all new. So you can kind of then get a sort of preview about what you're about to create a pull request for. Anyway, so finally, once you've like reviewed and make sure it's the right stuff that you want to commit, and you've got your title correct and you've got your description correct, you can click create pull request, and then this is going to make a pull request. So see, now we are back in the MHCP programs repo. We're no longer in our own. We've switched over into the competition repo. And now we're in this pull request section. And you can see that monetization MHCP build along example is pull request number 3, like it's competition entry number 3 potentially. You can see the description I added for my particular entry. And then here, this will be where you might have a dialogue with the competition judges about like things they like about your document, some things they might want you to have improve. And so you might need to go back and edit your documents in your own repo to make changes for that. And that will get then automatically brought along into this pull request. So that's why once you have this link set up between your branch and the pull request, like changes you make in your branch will get sort of tagged along into your pull request automatically. So shows you the commits that you made and the files you changed. So anyway, that's how you would submit something to the competition. Are we allowed to go ahead and do a test branch and pull request so that we can practice doing this before we actually submit? You can do a test pull request, like perhaps if you wanted to do a test pull request into your own repo, you could do that. So like rather than targeting it at the, let's see if we go back here, if I can do that. Over here, let's see. I think you could maybe do a pull request back to your own branch. Like you could, so see, I switched the target of this to my own branch. And so you could do a practice here of doing a pull request back into your own branch. And so basically this is now just merging the changes from my particular work branch into my own main branch. So this is not into the competition. So you could do something like that if you wanted. But if that answers the question that you had. You should only submit, things that are publicly known. Don't submit NDA materials in the competition. Obviously, they should be things that are available to everybody, to all public creators. All right, looks like I'm not going to quite have time to go through the edit VS Code section, but the one thing I wanted to just mention with editing in VS Code is that when you're in VS Code, you get like a nice side-by-side view where you, as you're typing, you can see like the markdown is being rendered next to you. So it makes it just, you don't have to switch back and forth like you do in GitHub to see what the preview is. The preview is being sort of live rendered right next to you as you're going along. And using GitHub to do, I use VS Code to do a lot of my editing just because I like the more immediate feedback of what I see. But there are a few extra steps because you have to basically hook up your VS Code to your GitHub account, and then you have to sync the changes down to your local machine. So it's like adding an extra step, because like not only do you have your fork of the competition repo and your branch of the competition repo, now you also need to sync those changes down to your local machine, do the edits there, submit them on your local machine, and then push them up to your branch in GitHub, and then make a PR from there. So it's like an extra step, so which is why I put it sort of at the end, because you can do everything you need to do entirely on GitHub. But if you do want to do this extra step, I have some extra docs in the slide deck, which should be available pretty soon on how you would actually use GitHub to do those things. And here are a bunch of references. I think some of these are already in the chat, like these 2 GitHub Markdown references. There are also some websites out there that can do GitHub Markdown preview, like this one, Markdown preview. Like this does something very similar to what you can do in VS Code, which is like as you're typing on the side, it's gonna put stuff. It's doing the real-time Markdown on the other side. So this can be useful. You don't want to do the GitHub, do the VS Code route to like see previews of your stuff. There's a couple of different Markdown preview websites. Again, this is a link to the competition repo. One thing I didn't get to is that there is this README over in the competition website, which is all about the Doc Mini Challenge. I strongly recommend you read through this. It has a lot of sort of restating about how to do forking and contributing and editing. There's a bunch of just how to submit your pull request. So like this is another take on doing that whole thing we just walked through. So you can take a look at that too if you don't have access to the slide deck. It's all right there at the top page of the competition repo. And this is the URL of the competition repo. This is all right here on the top page of the competition repo. You can read through all that, and it kind of goes through again how to create forks, create branches, submit changes, etc., etc., etc. And there's a little FAQ at the end. And this is the Markdown document template. I think I dropped that in the chat too. And then best of luck to everybody on their entries.